Hi, thanks for being with me today. This is the winning white paper, 5 key success factors for white papers that do what they're supposed to do in your sales and marketing efforts. Quick overview. White paper can be and really needs to be more than just a piece of content on a bill of materials. This is something I've run into over the years where there's like a product launch coming and you're going to need a press release, you need a white paper, need a blog post. Just order it, get it written, done. It really can and should be a lot more than that. So what I call a winning white paper is one that drives desired sales and marketing outcomes. Like, what are you trying to achieve in sales and marketing, and how does the white paper help advance those agendas? So making it happen, there's a lot to it, but I'm sharing you the benefit of my experience. There's really 5 things that you need to be doing. The paper has to align sales and marketing narratives. It has to address the prospect's actual problem, not what you want their problem to be. You have to coordinate your own team. This is not related directly to the paper, but I will talk about this in a few minutes. This can be critical. Creating a white paper is a team effort, and you really have to have everybody on the same page. You have to align the tone and content with audience personas, and you also, if you need to, and you almost always need to, deflect FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the kind of competitor-driven confusion that can really impair the sales and marketing process. So a white paper can be helpful in deflecting FUD and changing the terms of the conversation. So a little bit about me, just to explain how I got to be doing this. I've been in the tech industry for 25 years, and I've been in marketing and sales roles earlier in my career. And this includes having been responsible for lead generation and lead nurturing at a venture-backed startup. So I'd like to say that I've been on both sides of the table. Now I write white papers and other content, but for the last 12 years as a freelancer. But before that, I was on the buying side, so to speak, and I was responsible for some of the marketing and sales requirements that go into a white paper. I've written hundreds of white papers over the last 12 years plus, and working with clients like Microsoft, Intel, and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So I'm coming at this with a fair amount of experience, and I want to give you the benefit of my experience in this discussion. So just briefly again, what is a winning white paper? A winning white paper, in my experience, is one that, depending on where you are in the cycle, if it's for lead generation, it helps generate qualified leads, meaning that the curb appeal of the paper in a registration page where it has a description and you see the title page, that's enough to get people to sign up for it. A winning white paper is one that moves the sales process closer to a successful close. This is something that isn't always thought about enough in a white paper development conversation. This is usually a piece of selling content. It has to help the sales process. It should build thought leadership on the subject, and ideally it will trigger some meaningful dialogues with prospects and customers. The paper should be about something that people care about or that they relate to and it hooks them into a deeper conversation. And if you've been involved in sales, the more you're talking to the client, hopefully the closer you're getting to becoming the preferred vendor. So number one, of my top success factors for a winning white paper is align sales and marketing narratives. And this is a common problem, partly because sales teams and marketing teams are separate, and they may have even separate, leadership and separate incentives, separate cultures. They may be in different buildings, you name it. And there's often a different idea of what the narrative, what story you're telling or you want to tell in a paper from the sales team versus the marketing team. So for example, the sales narrative might be, we deliver higher performing storage. Sales narratives are usually more functional. It's like, what can we do to make you buy this? So you want performance? We've got performance. Here's the deal. Let's do the deal. Marketing is usually more abstract, sometimes more strategic, often snapping to the latest ideas, our storage powers digital transformation, something higher level. And sometimes that's because marketing wants to grab the attention of a higher level prospect, like a C-level person or someone. So they want to be talking about a big picture issue like security or digital transformation or something, whereas the people who actually buy the product, the decision makers, might be focused on more technical things. So how do you find the alignment? Okay, how do you resolve this impasse? So one is what I would call an arm wrestle, where you sort of argue about it and somebody wins. Okay, sales wins, it's all about performance, and forget about digital transformation. You can tell both stories. There's a way to tell both stories where you sort of like set the stage. For example, let's set the stage, talk about digital transformation and the role that storage has in it and why performance matters, and then land the idea that we're the high-performing solution. So you've kind of told both stories. But then you should come back and ask the basic question: what's going to help close deals? What do you really need help with? And that may also depend on the paper's primary purpose. So white papers exist for different purposes, like some are for lead generation, some are for lead nurturing, and some are really for, getting certain decision makers in the buying process to commit to you as the preferred vendor. So that might be, and I've done papers in these different stages, and I've even done an interesting project or two where there's like a series of papers for different personas at different stages of the deal, of the life cycle of the customer or the buyer's journey, so to speak, where you're going to be dealing with really specific issues. And so maybe in a white paper that's supposed to convince an engineering manager that he should prefer your solution because it's Java based, that's not a good time to be talking about digital transformation. That person is not interested in digital transformation. They're just going to roll their eyes at that. But keep in mind, if you can channel your inner Alec Baldwin, ABC, always be closing. You always should be asking, what is it going to take to move this deal down the road? And so really what you need is you have to have a dialogue between sales and marketing. I know that sounds like a cliche, but you'd have to do it. You have to have at least one conversation, or even one email, just checking in, like, what is it you need out of this paper? Let's see if we can resolve it and come to an acceptable piece of content that we both like. Number two, solve the prospect's actual problem. And this is a little bit like the first one, but it's a little more specific. This is another very common issue I've run into over the years, where the paper, the writer of the paper and the people putting the paper together have to figure out how the paper is going to talk about what the solution actually does versus what you want it to do. And this is just another one of these areas where people can get caught up in like vision and strategy and sometimes leave the practical sales and marketing issues on the side where they shouldn't be. I'll give an example. So let's say that your solution makes data center administration more efficient. You help data center admins be more productive. That's great. But for some reason, in the last 6 to 12 months, your company's changed direction. It wants to be an edge computing player. They want to be in the edge data center administration business. And there's maybe a lot of reasons for this. Like a good example is someone decides that that's going to make the share price go up. So the CEO says, henceforth, we are now the edge business. Everything's all about edge. They develop new branding, new messaging around edge computing, and on and on. And the product manager can sometimes be caught in the middle because the product manager might say, hey, we really are not an edge computing solution yet. We're still on-premises data center, cloud data center management. So how do you resolve that? And one of the sort of implied issues here is that the prospect may not be an edge prospect. I mean, that's, it's all fine if you want to be an edge computing data center administration solution, but if your prospects are not running edge data centers, you've just shot right past them, and they're not even going to think of you as a solution. So there are ways to resolve this impasse, and one of them is to just go up the chain and say, this paper really needs to address our practical realities of today's prospects. And we cannot be, it cannot be an edge computing message. Another way to do it is to, tee up the idea of edge computing. I'm just using this example, it actually came up recently. Edge computing is the wave of the future. It's where things are going, and therefore, efficiency really matters, and our solution provides efficiency, something like that, where you're kind of blending the ideas, but you're not like missing by a mile. You're not offering an edge solution to people who don't need an edge solution. That is a factor for success. It looks like someone is coming in. Hold on a second. So, hi, David. Okay, good. Thank you for muting. So anyway, the third key success factor is not directly related to the paper, to the content of the paper. Rather, it's about your team. And this is can be a touchy subject. I've written, as I said, hundreds of white papers over the last 10 to 12 plus years. And, once in a while, a project can sort of go sideways on me. But almost every single time there's a problem, it's from an issue of team organization on the client side. And what can happen is that the team that ordered the paper wasn't in agreement on its content. Like if you go back to the previous conflict between sales and marketing, or what the product actually does versus what they want it to do. If there isn't a consensus about what the paper should be, then when the paper gets written, certain people may not be happy with it. That's one issue. And then you end up with these weird comments like, this isn't what we want to be saying. And or certain team members are not included in the process at all. And this I have seen a few times, and it can be a little rough, where you have a whole briefing process, the paper gets written, you turn in a draft, it gets handed over to somebody, and they're like, what is this paper? I have no idea what's going on here. Who ordered this? What were you thinking? It can be a big problem. So it's really helpful to make sure that the stakeholders are aware of the project and understand their roles in it. And another thing you can do, I insist on this, but I suggest it, is ask the writer for an outline of the paper before he or she writes it, because an outline is a great way to check in and say, this is the paper that you briefed me. Here's the paper I think you want. Here's the outline. Here's the little summary of it. Here's the sections it'll contain. Here's the messages. That way, if there's any sort of misalignment, that's a good time to catch it. Then it's easier to change an outline than to rewrite a whole paper. So that's something I suggest. It's a sort of a stealth element of a successful white paper. Another thing, the fourth item I want to talk about, is what I call aligning tone and content with personas. So there's different, if you're developing a marketing plan, you may have different buyer personas. There might be like the C-level person, the business manager, security person, software developer, IT manager, and so forth. Different white paper readers with different things on their minds, different priorities. So, it's difficult to write a paper that pleases everybody. But I'm including an excerpt here. This is from a real white paper. I'm not going to read this whole thing, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit of an eye chart, but I just wanted to share with you an example of like really technical language that can come up sometimes. So this paper this was for radio access networks, which is part of 5G infrastructure. The client was a software company in the 5G infrastructure space. The paper had this sentence. It said, the next level in the architecture is the near real-time RAN intelligent controller RIC. The RIC, which functions as the decoupled RAN control plane in the O-RAN Alliance's architecture, and on and on. This is very technical. They're talking about 10 millisecond response, radio resource management, RRM. This is really techy, okay? So the question is this the right way to write the white paper? Who is the reader of this paper? Does he or she need this level of technical detail? So I'm providing some answers, but I just realized it's funny. I only just noticed this a minute ago. All of my answers are actually questions. So that kind of shows you how confusing things can get. But the answer to the question is really another question, which is it's not so much who's the reader, because there will be more than one reader. A paper should be hopefully read by different people on a prospects team. The question is who counts the most? Who's really the buyer? And in this case, they were aiming at a technical buyer. They really felt that the buying decision would be made or influenced. The biggest champion they could hope for was an engineer. They wanted to really land certain ideas with an engineering-centric reader. And if it was too complicated for a business manager, then that's too bad. Okay. And it just depends. The other question is, where are you in the sales cycle? Is this kind of a top of the funnel? Is this a lead generation paper where you're just trying to get people into a dialogue about sales? Or are you further down the line where you're really trying to be, getting close to a close, establishing preference for your solution over others for engineering reasons and so forth? Which person is most influential? And if the answer is that the technical persona is not the most important, then maybe content like this needs to be put somewhere else in the paper. And one of my solutions to this is to use sidebars or appendices. Like if you really want to be talking about the 10 millisecond latency and the RRM and the RIC and the RAN and the ORAN, and you think that the C-level reader is just going to like roll his eyes and just throw it away, put it in a sidebar, because that way the engineering persona can say, oh, here's the detail I want, but you're not putting it in the main flow of the paper itself. That's the solution. And the fifth and final key success factor is for a winning white paper is to deflect FUD. FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is a common, an ever-present problem in any sort of competitive technological sales and marketing environment, and they all are. If you know of any non-competitive ones, please contact me separately, and we'll go into that business. It'll be great. Every time you're trying to sell something, you have a competitor who either in a loud, obnoxious way or in some quiet, subtle way is telling the buyer that your product has a problem and their product doesn't. But let me tell you the reality. And you know this, right? Every technology product has a problem or two. And I've worked at enough tech companies. I worked at IBM. I worked at Microsoft. I've been involved in sales and marketing at venture-backed startups. I worked at HPE and Akamai. Every single, and not singling them out, everybody has a problem. There's some problem with the product, whatever it is. And so what I like to start the conversation about a white paper, not by asking, oh, what do you want to communicate in this white paper? I ask, why are you losing deals? What's going wrong? And sometimes people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to admit it. So then I become like a therapist. It's like, I'm like, you can tell me I'm the writer. It's okay. I'm like a therapist, is scalability here in the room with us? It's okay. You can talk about it. You're in a safe space. And I mean, all kidding aside, it can be difficult for people who manage a product or sell a product to admit that they're having trouble with it. But that's exactly why you need to deal with it. This is what, again, I sound like a therapist. This problem's only going to get worse if you don't deal with it. So, if your competitor is saying that you don't scale, then you need to talk about how you do scale, because that way you can implicitly deflect the FUD. So if your competitor is saying, oh, these people don't scale, then you can just talk in the white paper, bring up examples of how you scaled. When I was at Microsoft, I was working on SharePoint. The competitors to SharePoint were saying like, well, SharePoint doesn't really they brought up the scalability issue. And so what we did was we developed content that talked about how SharePoint was used at, massive government agencies and other environments where it was highly scalable. So, this is how you do it. You have to deflect the competitive messaging, in the paper if you can. And just in a general sense, I want to talk about white papers and buyers' emotions, because sometimes especially in an engineering-centric organization, people can focus a lot on technical details, features, benefits, buyer requirements, and so forth. I think it can be helpful, even maybe just as a thought process, to step back and ask questions about the emotions and desires of the prospect. Because in my experience, buying a technological product is partly an emotional process. It starts out with, a business imperative. We have to do something in our business, which then becomes an information quest. They're looking for information about solutions because I need something. I have a need that needs to be addressed. And there can be like almost an anxiety that comes with this. The buyer is saying, I'm worried, I'm going to lose my job if I can't find higher performing storage. It's not a trivial thing. So they're looking for a solution for a storage problem, but they're also looking for a solution to basically like an emotional problem. So therefore, if they may respond to messaging that speaks to those emotions. So we have this, we have to do something, I need to, I respond to, therefore I notice things that speak to these emotional issues. So I'm not going to go through all the bullets on this slide, but it's just kind of a thought process to keep in mind when you're doing a paper, that there should be like this emotional narrative, and there's sort of an art to weaving it in, in reading in between the lines that you're speaking to people's emotions. And just to quickly wrap up, white papers are successful when they attract prospects and or move them down the line to buying. And a winning white paper is one that aligns sales and marketing narratives, solve the prospect's actual problem. It's written in a tone that maps to the paper's sales and marketing drivers, deflects FUD, and comes from a well-coordinated team. So those are my thoughts for today. I hope you found this useful in your content development work. Would love to talk to you if you have further questions, or if we can help you with any content writing projects. My information is on the slide here, and you can find me other ways. But thank you so much for being with me today.